Okay, especially for those people online, let's do a virtual hug. We recently replaced the computer for our live stream, and it's been creating a buzz on the audio track there. We've tried another remedy this week, which I'm understanding has not worked, so we're going to get on to get maybe someone with a higher pay grade in there to take a look at that. I'm also realizing, it is Potluck Sunday, Abundance Sunday, but being the third Sunday and being Father's Day. I don't know how many people brought in food, but if you are here for the first time, don't worry about it. There's usually plenty. Okay. There was a church that was holding an auction. People who would give stuff to the church, and the auction would be there. So the big fundraiser. Us ministers, we always want more money. So they're doing the auction. And one of the auction's items was something that nobody thought would be a big deal. It was choosing the hymn for the next 3 weeks. And so the auction is going, yet there was this one woman in the back who was just making sure she was going above each one, and then finally she had it, and she said, "I bid $10,000.
Wow.
Going once, going twice, wow, okay. And the minister invites her up and says, "Wow, that's amazing." And she says, "I know the hymns that I want." And she looked out at the congregation and said, "I'll take him, and him." Whatever works for you, right? Now, as I mentioned, and of course we're talking about Father's Day, and I know that some people have had a pleasant experience or an unpleasant experience or a mix of both. Some had abuse, some had wonderful nurturing, some had absence. But it's fascinating because when you ask someone, well, what's the difference between the energy of a father and of a mother? You may not be able to come up with exact words for it, but it's like, yeah, there is kind of a difference to the approach that we all have either craved or have experienced. And one of the outgrowths of that is if you're looking at God as this father figure up in the sky somewhere, and you had an abusive father, you just assume that this God up there in the sky feels the same way about you. No, I don't believe that. I don't know if I've mentioned this before, but I believe we're all spiritual beings having a human experience. So yeah, we were already spiritual. It's just a matter of, we had this amazing exercise of letting that flow come through us. Occasionally I'll ask, well, you guys are called unity. What does unity mean? Well, Charles and Myrtle Fillmore, who started this whole movement back in 1889, during the 1890s, in one of his meditations, it came to his unity. And they just started calling this weekly newsletter they were mailing out, Unity. And it's funny because they didn't come up with specific definitions, but people get such a connotation from that word. We are one with God. We are one with each other. We have a oneness, a wholeness, that if we're willing to embrace, seems to improve our lives. In the first book in our Bible, Genesis, first chapter, 26th verse, as this God is creating the experience, God says, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness, male and female. Let's make these people." Unity has this different approach to the Bible. Some are willing to take it literally. And I remember hearing one was, "I don't take it literally, I read it for what it is." So, well, that is an interpretation. That is one way to approach the Bible. You can take it as history, you can take it as literature, you can take it as a novel. But there are these 66 books written by just as many authors, and there are places they contradict each other, even in the 4 Gospels. So it's kind of like, which is it? Well, when I discovered through Unity and through the Metaphysical Bible Dictionary that there's this symbolism that's there. It's been there for many times. In fact, why am I blanking out on the word? The Jewish group, Kabbalah, that Unity leaned very heavily on them during the 1920s as they were compiling the Metaphysical Bible Dictionary. All these esoteric traditions kept carrying this all through, until our consciousness could evolve to where we didn't see it as threatening. And it is repeated through the Hebrew Scriptures that we forget our oneness. We forget who we really are. There's this repeating story of the Jewish people get in trouble, and then a judge pops up, and by a judge, just the leader we need at this moment, and leads us forward so that we can once again understand our oneness and what we're supposed to do. And then you get to the next book in the Hebrew Testament, and once again, oops, we forgot. Well, let me help you remember. Oops, we forgot. Let us help you remember. In the Gospel of John, 10th chapter, 30th verse, Jesus says, "The Father and I are one." And in many of the more traditional Christian denominations, they think that means that Jesus is saying that he was better than anyone else. He was God. I believe what he was saying is we're all spiritual beings having a human experience. We all can allow this divine to come through us. Now, there's a story known as Jesus Christ's parable of the Prodigal Son. Some people call it the lost son. It's interesting because here we do have these 4 Gospels written for 4 separate audiences over about a 30-year period. And it's only in one of the Gospels, Luke. And Luke was writing for the European theater. That sense of wow, these people, here in what today we call Israel, has a wonderful spiritual approach. Let me bring it to the European theater, I guess, for lack of a better word. So I want to drill a little deeper into this. Some of you may have heard it before, some not, but it's a wonderful story, and it has such a wide application. Gospel of Luke, 15th chapter, starting with the 11th verse. And Jesus said, there was a man who had 2 sons. The younger of the 2 sons said to his father, "Father, give me the percentage of the inheritance that will fall to me." And the father divided his property between his 2 sons. Not many days later, the younger son gathered all he had and took his journey into a far country. And there he squandered his property in loose living. And when he had spent everything he had, a great famine arose in that country, and he began to be in want. He went to work for one of the farmers of that country, who sent him into his fields to go feed the swine. The younger son would gladly have fed on the pods that the swine ate, but no one gave him anything. But then he came to himself. He said, "How many of my father's hired servants have plenty to eat, and yet here I am perishing and hungry? I will arise and I will go to my father. I will say to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me as one of your hired servants.' And then he arose and he came to his father, but while he was in the distance, the father saw him, had compassion, and ran and embraced him and kissed him. And the son says, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son.' But his father stopped him and said to his servants, Bring quickly the best robe, put it on him. Put a ring on his hand, shoes on his feet. Bring the fatted calf and kill it. Let's eat and have a party. For this, my younger son was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found. And then they began to party. Now the elder son had been out in the field. And he came and drew near to the house. He hears music. He hears dancing. He called to one of the servants and said, what this meant? And the servant said, your brother has returned and your father has killed the fatted calf because he is back safe and sound. The elder son became angry. He refused to go into the house. His father came out and requested he come in, and he said to his father, lo, for all of these years I have served you, and I have never disobeyed your command, yet you never gave me a fatted calf. You never gave me a party with my friends. But when this son of yours came, who has devoured your property with harlots, you killed for him the fatted calf. The father looked at him and said, son, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours. It was fitting to have a party and be glad, for your brother was dead and now is alive. He was lost and now found. A lot of people can relate to characters in this story. And of course, from a father's perspective, that sense of like, wow, this guy should be nominated for sainthood. He was forgiving. He didn't say to the son who wanted his portion of the inheritance, you nuts, no. Sit down and eat your lunch. That kind of a thing. It's like, oh, okay, if that's what you need, that's what you need. But each of these narrative stories in these Bible books are symbolic. And they're symbolic not just of characteristics of others, but of characteristics of ourselves. If we look at all three of these characters, the father, the two sons, as being aspects of ourselves, it starts to make much more sense. It becomes much more powerful in living a spiritual life. There's a wholeness, an awareness, a consciousness, a self-realization that slowly unfolds over these 66 books of the Bible. We go from Genesis with Adam and Eve consciousness to the four Gospels, where suddenly we're experiencing this Christ consciousness, all the way to Revelations, when we're having our final struggle and willing to let go of all the crap. Now, the symbolism, as I've said before, all male characters are our thinking nature, all female characters are our feeling nature. But every character is an aspect of us. So it's interesting that there are no names. The sons don't have names. In places where they give a name of a female or a male character, like for example, Peter means faith, the thinking of faith. And of course, if you combine thinking with feeling in a proper way, you can have wisdom, which is a much higher expression, of faith. John represents love. Thomas represents understanding. So these characters, though, aren't named. So that means it's just a generalization of what's going on inside of us. So the Father symbolizes that center of us, that God consciousness that is always there, that we sometimes completely ignore, or we try to shut off because we don't think it's serving us very well. Each of us has that spark of divinity within us. So we've got these two sons, which are thoughts or ideas or beliefs within us, basic assumptions. You got the younger son, who's the rebel. Have you ever had a time in your life where you were rebellious? Whether it be 10 years or 10 minutes, So asleep completely to the fact that they're spiritual being, a human spirit son. And it's the five senses that count. What I can see, what I can feel out here. And so I'm going to go out there and I am going to climb the ladder of success. I'm going to do all of the things that I think I need to be successful. Purchasing all of the things I desire, having a really good time. Every individual goes through this stage, and it's necessary as part of our growth. The Wheel of Fortune, before it was a TV game show, was a symbol of the way life is. You know, it's like a Ferris wheel. Sometimes you're at the top, sometimes you're sinking, sometimes you're at the very bottom, and then suddenly you're ascending again. You know, that creative cycle of create, persist, and then dissolve. Sometimes it's something we create just for a few minutes, sometimes for a lifetime. So, the Wheel of Fortune allows us to live that Ferris wheel aspect of it. But then here's the older brother. The older brother represents that conforming part of us that follows the rules, that colors within the lines, that does all of the things that we know is the right thing to do. Yet there's a sense of restriction there. So consider the inner battle. You know, adult, child, mature, immature, rebellious, just holding steadfast. You know, I'm a firstborn son in my family, so I knew how to do it right. And I had to kind of let go of that over time because it didn't really work very well for me. And that's kind of the point. You know, we have this divinity within us. We have the adult and the child. You know, the inner child of the past. You know, the famous book about how we learn how to be as kids and yet how we can release the things that are toxic to us. So here we have this older son out in the field. The assumption is he's never left home. But could it be that this is all happening within? It's like, okay, I'm doing what I need to do. But there's this aspect where this elder son seems to be feeling he needs to do something out of an obligation rather than because he's expressing a passion. So he is in bondage. You know, now the younger son goes out to win the game of materialistic accumulation, strokes the ego. I did it all on my own, which of course is never true. We're always standing on the shoulders of someone else. We fight our way to the top, we get there, and then we say, is this all there is? Each of us needs to get to that point where we recognize that it's not about getting something from the world, it's about giving something to the world. What are my special gifts, passions, and talents? What are the things I do really well? The passion comes through me and I'm out there making this world a better place in every little way that I can. Or maybe in a big way. You don't have to be, say, Gandhi. Now you can just be the best father you can be under the circumstances. So we have this aspect of our human mind, our human consciousness, and that we're trying to find meaning in everything. And what does this mean? And we find some way of crafting a meaning as to what an experience is. But it's up to us. And sometimes, like I said, we get to the point where like, yeah, that may have worked for me for the last 20 years, but it's not working for me anymore. I let go of it. So when we forget that we're a spiritual being having a human experience, we often demonstrate a crisis in one of the various categories of our life. You know, the five I often talk about. A crisis in health, a crisis in occupation, a crisis in relationships, a crisis in financial supply, or perhaps spirituality, spiritual growth, spiritual connection. In the Gospel of John, 5th chapter, 19th verse, Jesus says, I of myself can do nothing. It is the Father within me and through me that does all the work. So yeah, when I can get out of my bloated nothingness and realize, move forward with the guidance I have today. I may not know the end of this journey, but I'm going to do what I know I need to do today. Success does not come from getting there, it comes from earning the right to be there. I'll say that again. Success does not come from getting there, it comes from earning the right to be there. So let's go back to the story. We've got the younger son, he's feeding hogs. Now here, in the Jewish faith, 2,000 years ago, a Jew was not allowed to eat pork. It was an unclean animal. They weren't even supposed to touch them. So here's this, you picture, okay, just destitution, nothing seems to be working. I'm feeding hogs, they're eating better than I am. We have that crisis that comes into our life, like that dope slap on the back of our head. And then he sort of, wait a minute here. I know how I can get some food. And sometimes it's just spiritual food, but we get to that point of just feeling empty, feeling like there's no meaning, so we're able to say. And the important line in here, important line, I should say, 17th verse, he says, when he came to himself, when he came to that realization once again of, wait a minute, there is this center that I know as my father, or my mother, or whatever, just there's a center that brings me to a place of peace beyond understanding. The other thing that's interesting here is he didn't blame others for his plight. He just said, I've had that change of my mind, He remembered his true nature, and the word repent, especially in our Western culture, it came from the word metanoia, in the Hebrew and Greek tradition, which means I changed my mind about that. So he changed his mind about that. And of course, in 12-step programs, the first thing you need to admit is, hey, I got a problem and I don't know how to fix it. And I'm willing to ask others for help. So, the important part of learning is to unlearn some of the old assumptions that no longer work for us. And a word that has been severely misused in recent years is the word freedom. Friedrich Schiller was a German philosopher, lived from 1759 to 1805. He's a good friend of Goethe. And one of my favorite quotes is, freedom is not just doing what you want. It's about becoming who you must become. Follow the divine guidance. Do what is yours to do. Notice that in this parable, the father's always calm and collected, like said, yeah, if you need to go off into the far country, go ahead. Do it. When I was growing up, both of my grandparents on my mother's side, who lived there in Chicago with us, smoked. And they were very wise with the 4 kids in my family. Oh, you want to try a cigarette? You go right ahead. Here, I'll light it for you. And as we're stoking a cigarette, like, why am I doing this to myself? And especially watching, both of them have the heart disease, the lung problems. It was kind of like, yeah, it's interesting. None of the 4, none of my brother and my 2 sisters, we never smoked. So let God be God through you. So the younger son came to himself and he rehearsed a speech. Remember, Father, I've sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me as one of your hired servants. And that's interesting. He said, sinned against heaven and before you. Remember, heaven is symbolic of our growing awareness that we're a spiritual being having a human experience, and how to remember that more often than we usually do. But there is a flaw in this attitude, and that's the words here. Treat me as one of your hired servants. He still kind of felt like he needed to punish himself. He needed to be a slave rather than a free person. Perhaps he didn't think he deserved it. So, here he comes to Dad, starts into his little speech. But he doesn't mention being a servant. Dad says, bring him the robe, bring him the ring, the shoes on his feet. Now, robe is symbolic of just this new self-image. The sense of, okay, I finally feel worthy of my inheritance. The ring declares a commitment to spirituality, so that all may know. Some of us have rings that express a commitment. And then, of course, shoes. The feet are symbolic of understanding. The older brother, do you know anyone who's like the older brother? Too religious to be spiritual, too holy to be human. The church ladies in our life, the ones that march into a church office and say, you guys don't know the gospel. So, beyond the facade, this older brother, like I said, okay, obligation, jealousy, bitterness, resentment, all work and no play. Yeah, I worked hard all these years, and what did it get at me? What did you expect it to get you? So often we built this assumption that, hey, nobody said that to us. Nobody said that to me. But I had an assumption, and I suddenly discovered maybe it doesn't work that way. So when the older son complains to the father, there's this important realization that all of us need to remember. My child, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours. Something we can embrace and live. The younger son dropped the need to punish himself, and the older brother also needed to drop the need to punish himself, to feel worthy, to feel that he's operating out of his own consciousness rather than out of an obligation. We each need that balance within us. The Father is always there, this God conscious, regardless of what we do. Whatever you have done, whatever you feel guilty about, even that, you're forgiven. It's up to you to change your way of thinking, to do it differently next time. In fact, there's almost that sense of this God presence in us, like, I'm glad you're done with this stage of your life. Can we move forward now? So, the prodigal son, let's go ahead and put up the takeaways, which you got in your handout. Prodigal son, the Gospel of Luke. So, for this coming week, ponder. What do these symbols mean in your life? What is the Father to you? What is the younger son? What is going into a far country? And what does the words, when he came to himself, mean? What about the older son? What does that mean? And then remembering that all that is mine is yours too. I remember Eric Butterworth talking about how this is the story of every person. We all have the opportunity to return to the center, and when we finally do, let's throw a party. I've got a 3-minute video from Steve Hartman of the CBS Evening News.
When 48-year-old Lamont Thomas became an empty nester, it was the end of a parenting legend. Back in 2001, this divorced father of 2 took on a foster kid named Michael Perez.
He was a good young man, and I just hated to see him in the system.
Eventually, Lamont adopted Michael, who now works as a nurse.
I don't believe that I would be the person that I am today without the morals that he instilled in me, the family, the extended family that I have now.
How extended is that family?
I had the fingers and toes to count.
Turns out Michael was just the beginning. Over the next 15 years, Lamont fostered more than 30 kids here in Buffalo, New York, and adopted 5 of them. And again, he did this all on his own and with all of his heart.
Every child that I have had, it was my goal to make a difference in their lives.
You fell in love with these kids, huh?
Yeah, proud of them.
And you retired from fostering.
I did.
Go fishing?
Oh yeah, we did plenty of fishing.
Trips?
Love all of that.
Of course, we wouldn't be here today if that was still the case.
Yes, sir.
It really was a shocker. I didn't expect for him to restart and to do it all over again. It's just amazing.
Today, Lamont is back in the game in a big way. Not long ago, he took on 5 siblings, all under the age of 6.
Major eating books.
Lamont, who works as a caterer, says he did have other plans for these years. But those plans have now been shattered with mayhem.
When was the last time you went fishing?
Yes.
Lamont decided to foster all 5 after he found out they were going to be permanently split up.
Yes.
And to guarantee they stay a family, last month, he adopted them.
Very good.
You were hereby adopted.
I had to help them. They deserve to be raised together.
Fortunately, Lamont has a great support system through church and friends. And he's not opposed to adding a wife to the mix, should such a saint exist.
Don't leave my hair, please.
But if not, he's also fine going it alone, for as long as it takes to make the difference.
Have you calculated when the last one's going to be out of high school?
We got a lot of years to go. But it's all right. It's all good.
Lamont Thomas, definitely all good. Steve Harvey, on the road, in Buffalo.
Y'all have our gifts, passions, and talents. Gospel of Luke, 15th chapter, 31st verse. And the father said to him, "My child, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours. And may you always be open to God's guidance and grace." It's time now for some special music.
God, you are every mountain. God, you are every ocean. God, you are every canyon, every inch of earth and sky. You are every morning. God, you are every midnight. God, you are every moment, every second of my life. Everything I see, everything I do, everything I am is you. Everything I love, everything below, everything I know is you. God, you are every sunrise. God, you are every moonglow. God, you are every sunshine, every inch of earth and sky. God, you are every springtime. God, you are every snowfall. God, you are every season, every second of my life. Everything I see, everything I do, everything I am is you. Everything I love, everything below, everything I know is you. You are every breath I breathe. And your perfect love created me. Everything I see, everything I do, everything I am is you. Everything I love, everything below, everything I know is you. Everything I see, everything I do, everything I am is you. Everything I love, everything below, everything I know is you.
Thank you, that was lovely.
Okay, let's see where we are here. If this is your first time at Unity, we are so glad that you're here. We hope that you are finding a place of like-minded people and a place to belong. We teach spiritual tools that can help you no matter what is going on in your life. Generosity is important to us. We will donate $5 to a local charity of your choice if you will just write your email on the card in our welcome packet and leave it in our office. We don't want to put you on the spot, but if you desire, you can raise your hand and someone will bring you a welcome packet. Or do we have any new folks here today? Okay. We now have an opportunity to support our spiritual cooperative. If you would like to donate by credit card, please go to our website, unityhillcountry.org, and click on the donate button. You can set up an automatic weekly or monthly contribution. If you would prefer to mail us checks, please mail them to Unity of the Hill Country, 1016 Jefferson Street, Kerrville, Texas, 78028. We thank you in advance for your generosity. Would the ushers now please bring the offering baskets up? Together, let us say our offertory blessing. Divine love, as me, blesses and multiplies all that I am, all that I give, and all that I receive. I send it forth with my blessings and my love. For these freely given donations. We send these gifts forward through our congregation and into our world, blessing all that it affects. We have a few brief announcements. Please refer to the schedule of events on the back of your takeaways handout. The Serenity Al-Anon meets at noon on Mondays. If you have a friend or loved one suffering from addiction and you need support, please visit Al-Anon. The Naked Now has been canceled for the month of June as several of the regular attendees will be out of town. A Course in Miracles, facilitated by Charlie Diggs, meets at 4 p.m. on Wednesdays. This meeting will meet on Zoom until the end of August. Please reach out if you are interested in participating. We will put you in touch with Charlie. Codependence Anonymous meets weekly on Thursdays at 7 p.m. This is an open meeting for anyone that is interested. Please visit coda.org for more information. The Center of Calm Meditation Group meets weekly at 10:30 on Thursdays. You also have an opportunity to use the meditation chapel before services on Sundays starting at 10:15. Our meditation chapel is over here. If you're on Facebook, please join us. Please join our new group, Unity Spiritual Network, and stay connected with our community online. Neil Simon's I Ought to Be in Pictures opens this week at the Calous VK Garage Theater and runs until July 2nd. There will be one free preview show at 7:30 this coming Thursday, so you all might want to take advantage of that. This production is assisted, directed, and stage managed by our very own Brad Gilbert. So check it out. The Kerr County Human Rights Project will be hosting their first ever potluck for peace this coming Sunday here at Unity, as Reverend Bob mentioned, at 5 p.m. Some refreshments will be provided, and there will be a food truck and some local vendors providing plates, but you are encouraged to bring your own sides and desserts. This event is open to the whole community. If you would like an opportunity to serve our community, please be a Sunday host, usher, daily word reader, or whatever you have in mind. Please let us know. We would love for you to be on our team. We do have sign-up sheets, by the way, in the lobby if you are interested in doing this. We have several members looking to step away from their Sunday commitments by the end of the month, so we have plenty of opportunities.
And with that, we have come to the end of our gathering. Please join us now if you will stand and sing the